Hello everybody. So I got a little bit of an obsession. I got several actually when it comes to art and art materials. One of them started last year, about a year and a bit ago, and I bought these 7220 pens from Staedtler. They were on sale, very much off, and I bought them, and it resulted in one of my most viewed videos. I think they were on sale because they were kind of changing things around a little bit. They have changed the packaging, not the content. So now it has a nature motif on the front and a logo saying Design Journey. And I got more Design Journey items over the year. I got the color pencils. I got watercolor pencils. These watercolor pencils were the last thing I reviewed a few days ago. And I got the super soft and colored pencils that I've also done a review of. And I am quite happy with all of this. It has been really good fun to work with them. And I think for what you pay, you get quite good art materials or design materials, because they don't promise anything about art. They use the word design and then they just put promises they can keep on the box. They don't try to sell you something that the product can't or possibly can't live up to. So this is stuff for doing hobby stuff, design stuff, illustrations, sketches, brainstorming, whatever you like. Just don't sell your art that you do with this. Don't make permanent art with it, because there's no information, there's no promise about light fastness. But if you want to try new art materials out, and maybe don't really want to pay what the real deal art material costs, they actually give you a pretty good idea about what to expect. So that's a journey I've been enjoying, and I want to continue it with this watercolor crayon set, which is today's review. I had a bit of an argument between my adult self, my wallet, and my inner child, and we kind of came to a truce and an agreement. So I got the 12 set of watercolor crayons, not the 24. You can get 12 or 24, and none of it to this day, to my knowledge, is sold open stock. I will not lie, I have been using these, I have been playing with them. I actually usually do that often, or I do it more and more with new art materials, so I kind of have an idea what to say. It says a Design Journey on the package. On the back it says in several languages: watercolor crayons, highly opaque colors, blend easy, to be used with brush and water for a variety of washes. Special effects can be achieved with layering and scratching. Paper sleeve, keep hands clean. So they don't fill you with a whole smear of promises that they can't keep. I think they go by the notion that it's better than it is better than expected, than worse than promised. So yeah, I broke one, and that can happen to crayons regardless of what brand you use. And I was held up a little too high, pushed a little too hard, and it snapped off. Now I got small fingers and it's water soluble, so when this stump gets to the point where I can't really hold on to it anymore, I'll find a little something to put it in and just use it as a watercolor pen. So the 12 colors we get is a yellow, a salmon pink, a orange, a red. It just says red, no definition of what kind of red. Burgundy, it says cobalt blue, but it's not. But it's nice blue. A light blue, a light green, a dark green. This is called a yellow green. Dark green Van Dyke brown, a white, and a black. And they're not necessarily packed in this order. I think actually the white was over here originally. So, as I said, no light fast information, no pigment information, I know all that jazz. Let me grab the black because that's the one that is the easiest to show you. Need my zoom button or my focus button. So the paper that is wrapped around here has these loops, and at the bottom of each loop is a perforation, which is brilliant because sometimes in some crayons, first of all, it can be difficult to get hold of the paper, and second of all, when you get a hold and you start tearing, sometimes it just rips too far down. And now I got quite dry hands normally. I really rarely sweat in my hands, but if you have oily or sweaty hands, it gets one hot sticky mess if you hold on to a water soluble crayon like this with no paper. You can wrap some other paper or plastic or whatever you can find around them if it's a problem and you lost the paper, but it's nice to be able to just carefully peel it off as you go. Some of them are quite loose in the sleeve. Oh, I'm sure we'll get to that. I think this green is one of them. Yeah, well, teeth. So, but it's there. So this is a mixing set, and somewhere I got my pad of paper lost underneath stuff. Here we go. Sorry that the camera is probably gonna flicker now, but yeah. So watercolor crayons, there's so many different ways you can use them. Right now I'm just gonna put them down like this and try and dissolve them in water and see how they work. They don't feel very waxy. They look a bit waxy, some more than others when you put them down, but they don't feel waxy. Not at the first layer at least. When you pile them up on thick layers, they start to feel more slick. But the first layer feels kind of a little dry. So the red looks a little too cold for me, a little bit too pinkish. And oops, no, this was dirty from something I did. I'll try and just wet this part. And this other one looks, the burgundy looks like a alizarin crimson to me. So I'm not quite happy with the selection of reds because they're both cold reds. But they gave me an orange, a really warm orange, so I'll work with that. Here's that cobalt blue. It's a little too bright for a cobalt blue and too dark as well, and it's not a cobalt blue. I'm quite sure that's a phthalo blue, but hey, cobalt colors are crazy expensive, so I really doubt that they have put cobalt pigments in this. This has no age restriction on it, which means it probably should not be used by kids. Art supplies that doesn't have age written on them anywhere, suited for kids from whatever to whatever or plus whatever age. Don't let kids use them. At least not little kids that might chew on it or suck on it or stick their grotty fingers with pigment in their mouths and stuff like that. Because there are pigments that are toxic, and it's not all of them that are expensive. So, kids, art supplies for kids. I don't want to put a specific age because some kids just mature quicker than others. I have met 15-year-olds I would still give only kit approved art materials too, and I am at 8 years old that I would be happy to give adult art materials. It really depends on how quickly they might mature, and they all get there eventually, but in their own time and speed. So the yellow here is very pigmented and it dissolves really quite easily with water. A little really goes a long way. You get a lot of material for your money buying this set. Now the salmon color here is, as long as you kind of keep it within the area you put it down on, it looks okay, but it's thin. Excuse me, I got a little bit of a hiccup. But it's not super pigmented, so in mixtures, and if you want to pull it out, you need to be aware that it thins out really quickly. So if you want to mix it with something else, don't use too much of that other color you mix with, otherwise it just disappears. It works as it should. It doesn't dissolve quite as easily as a yellow, but it does dissolve. The orange is also fairly okay, easily dissolved. That's a nice, bright, warm orange. Really enjoy that color. And we'll get back to that in a bit. Now, this is just the one that is just called red. And you can see it's a little bit of like a magenta. It's not really a warm red. I would have liked a more scarlet color or vermilion type red for the one red. Because here we got, and I have to be careful because I got to smear something else over there. This is the burgundy, and this is also a cold bluish red, and they're quite close to each other. So so that's a little bit of a downfall to this. It's not impossible, because if you want a warm red, you can mix this with the orange a bit and it will work. So here's that blue that's supposed to be cobalt, and it's so bright and has this very distinct color of phthalo blue. And that's not a complaint. For my sake, they could just have called it phthalo blue or just blue or whatever. They didn't have to call it cobalt blue, because this does not resemble to me a cobalt blue. I like it, and it's a good mixing color, and it will work. There was just no need to call it cobalt. Here's the other blue. It's a little more turquoise. This has a little bit of a purple lean to it, so that is all good. This one is slightly more greenish. I think there's a little bit of white mixed into this. I'm not entirely sure, but it has that feel, and it also thins out a little faster than the other, but it's a good, nice color. It does what it should. Then there's the yellow green here. That doesn't dissolve as well as the other colors. It does dissolve, but you have to work it a little bit. I'm using a synthetic brush that is kind of an all-rounder. I think it's mostly meant for acrylics, and I find that a slightly stiffer brush like this works best with watercolor crayons, because it's not unusual that you need to scrub a bit if you want them to dissolve a lot. Then there's this green, and that really also doesn't dissolve very well. If you have a sharp edge, it really leaves marks on the paper, so you have to maybe take that into consideration. But I worn it down a little bit. I've really been playing with them all day. I had so much fun with them, and it's a mid-green, just fine. Then there's the Van Dyke brown, and it to me looks more like a burnt sienna. It's very red. It doesn't matter. I got other colors to mix with it, so I can adjust it to my needs. This all's fairly okay. We will really see this, how much marks are left once they dry, because when you just dissolve them, sometimes it looks like, oh, it's all dissolved, and then when it dries, it shows scribble marks after all. And we'll get to that too. The black is nice and dark, and when we add some extra water to it, it turns into a warmish gray. I think this is potentially a ivory black, but it's very dark, so might also be a mixture of different black pigments. But there they are. I haven't used the white. I'll get to that. So let's talk about the red here. Let's just call it red, and why I'm glad the orange is there. So let's scribble some of this out. And one of the ways you can use these is you can use them directly on the paper, as I'm doing here, and you can mix them directly on the paper as well. You have to push a little hard though if you want them to mix, and you use the tripod hold grip here, and it looks a little dirty. It looks better on camera than it does on my pad. If you keep it very thick with not so much water, you get a decent orange, but it has a little bit of a brown tint to it. It's not as bright as that up there. My camera is trying to help it, so to you it might look quite bright, but it has like a slight brown tint to it. In a pinch it would work, and if you put it up against other colors, it might look brighter than it is on its own and stuff like that. But if I wanted a dark orange red, I would actually go with this one instead. Take the orange now that I got it, and I'll still use the red. The problem about this mixture is that the red leans a little bit towards blue, and so does actually the yellow. The yellow is a fairly cold yellow, so a little too far apart on the color wheel, and because they kind of lean a little bit towards blue, both of them, we get that kind of muted orange. So now I mix the orange and the red. The orange is kind of a pure orange as they come. It's a mid-orange. So the blue in the red does not affect this mixture as much as it did over there. So now we get like a really nice, bright, more scarlet, vermilion type red. So the set works, but you need the orange in there, and it's there, and it's good. The orange you can also adjust with the yellow if you want it to be more yellow. You can still do that, and it gets okay. And again, now we only add a little bit of blue from one source, so it's not as dominant as when we kind of got it from both. So here we got a more yellowy sunflower, warm yellow orange type thing. Now there's one color that there's a couple of colors that are not in here. There is no purple or violet, so let's take the burgundy and mix it with this blue, which leans a little bit towards the reds. And because I know that's a phthalo type blue, I'm laying extra of the burgundy and not so much of the blue. And this was what I did before, so that's what the impurity up there is all about. It's actually me making the violet. So just a little bit of water because I want it dark and concentrated. Because I use violet often as instead of a black, and that actually almost works. It is so dark. Let's paint it out thinner, and you can see it's a bluish, nice violet. Add some more red to it, and we get a more reddish purple. So this mixture really works nicely. You get a gradient here. So you can mix your violets as well, and I've tried both reds with both blues, and they give violets and purples. Now you can also make lighter colors, like let's take the brown here. You know, I said I thought it was too red, but you can add whatever you want to it and take it in whatever direction you want, so it's okay. But let's play with the white. I don't use white much in watercolors, but oh, this broke again. That's how I end up with stumps out of my crayons. But in this, when it's opaque colors, it makes sense to use them, because then you can pale them down and still have the good thick coverage. So this brown now turned into kind of a latte type of brown. Got a little bit more opaque. So I won't go through all the color combinations you can make. You can adjust all of them by mixing them. A 12 set I think is a good starting point if you're starting out learning color mixing, because it's possible to try out all the combinations between 12 colors. It gets very complicated very quickly if you have, say, 36, 48, 90 colors or whatever. You can't remember all the combinations, but here you can, with 12 colors, you get to know them, and you can learn by doing. So it said you could do different washes. I have tried it a little bit, and yeah, there's several ways of using crayons, like this, where you just scribble it on and paint it out. But you can also, here I've got to find something that is dry. Here we got a dry mix, so let's try and put something else on top. You can add blue to it. It works best with a dark color on top. And the way I hold them, like this, I pinch them, and preferably near the base, the tip, is the best way to prevent that they snap too much. If you hold them like a pencil, like this, and if you want to get good thick layers and you push hard, especially if you hold them a little bit flat because you're more used to writing than drawing, they will snap too. I can't even use them like that. If you feel that they're too long into your hand, it might make sense to snap them in half. So pretty much cover that other color with a darker color. And don't need to activate it. If you activate it, you risk that you mix everything together. From my Caran nail colors, I got this graffiti tool, and I don't know if they sell it by itself, but I got it. You can use whatever sharp edged tool you like, knives and other metallic things. Now you can scrape lines of the top color off. If you have activated the base layer, it tends that to stick to the paper a little bit better, so we should see some of the orange through here. I think I'm scraping a little too hard. So you can make effects like that, scraping parts of the top layer off. There are people who really make beautiful things like this. I just know the technique, I don't master it. But that's an option, and that was what they meant by layering and scraping. You can do this with oil pastels, by the way, as well, and any wax crayon. Then there's, you can also, let's grab the green here. You can also push a little hard when you make your lines, and then just add, with a light brush, just run over it with water, so you get the lines to wash out a little bit. You need a fair amount of water, so you get, you leave the lines behind. Also not a technique I'm really using, but it exists and it's an option. Now, if some people don't like when watercolor crayons do this, or can do it, and then it's a bug. Some people like it, and then it's a feature. I think these are so versatile, they can do a little bit of both. If you don't like the lines, I'll recommend that you get something. I got something fairly expensive. You can use other things. A piece of plastic or porcelain or stuff of sorts. Now I got this Caran d'Ache palette, and it is not super cheap for what it is. It is a plexiglass palette, and it has a little bit of texture on one side and it's totally smooth on the other. This works so that you, now the green, this is actually dry. The blue left some markings, and that one, the salmon, left some markings. It depends a little bit on how much pressure you put on it, and how much water and how much you scrub at them, how much is left as residue. But I think they washed out fairly okay. Anyways, back to the palette. If you don't want lines, and you make sure that you don't get lines, grab your crayon and rub it against the surface. It needs a little bit of a tooth to it, and then you use it as watercolor from here, or a gouache. If you want to use it as a gouache type, it doesn't get as opaque as real gouache. But now we can just paint it on, and it behaves like watercolor. And now you don't get any leftover lines at all. Now this is wet, so we can also do something that I do it for you guys. I don't normally do this. Now if you want some soft blurred lines, you can use it on the wet surface. They tend to float out a little bit, and they get stronger than if you wash them out like that. And you can see it grips into the texture of the paper. You can't see the markings as you could over here. I don't like getting my crayons wet. They last okay with it. They don't take any harm. It is just that now I got a crayon with a wet tip, and everywhere I put it down, I risk to leave a mark. It didn't, because it's worn a little bit, but it can. And if I stick it in the box and I move that around, then when I bring it out again, there's pigment smeared on the plastic and is useless to me. Now I'm gonna just put it like this and let it dry. Oh, actually I'm not, because there's another way of using them. If you don't have a palette, or either you don't have it with you, or you don't want one, or you can use it also directly from the crayon. Take it with a brush and paint it on. I've seen plenty of people do that. If you don't want to ruin the tip, there was somebody who, was it Lindsay, who took it from the behind. That didn't come out right. She picked it off, the pigment off of one end, so it gets hollow there, and you preserve your tip on the other end here. So you can use them just as regular watercolors. They are fairly opaque. They're not gouache opaque, but they're more opaque than most watercolors. Also on the palette you have an option to mix colors. Now if we want to get that green a little more yellow, we can activate it over here and mix it to whatever shade we want. Add more of one or the other and paint it back on. And you can of course use all the techniques interchangeably. You can use all of them or none of them on on a piece. So yeah, and these are no better or no worse than any other watercolor crayon I've used. And currently I am in possession of 2 brands. I got the Jackson from Hansel, and these actually feels exactly like those. So that's kind of interesting. And I compared some colors and I can't tell the difference, to be honest. Then I got Caran d'Ache New Color 2s. The new colors are more waxy to use. They have a more waxy feel, but other than that, I don't feel much of a difference between them. Also got the full set of the Jacksons. Yeah, now it's on the floor because I have rolled them around. But yeah, there's 35 here and 1 on the floor, and these are good as well. They feel exactly the same as the ones from Staedtler. This is a long video, and it's because I've been showing techniques, so I will not do a drawing with these today. I do not really favor this type of reviews, but it just took so long, and that's because I want to show you some of the techniques you can use them with. But I promise I will do a field test with these also. And I got one more Design Journey product I want to review, and then when that is done, I'm gonna try and do a mixed media thing because they work well together. I think I've said everything I need to say right now. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and please come back because I am gonna use them and show you. Actually, I got a little bit of a preview here of some of the ideas I've been playing with. And yes, this is 90% of my art is tests. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.